Should we start with some pleasantries? How was New Year?
New Year's was very chill, very calm. I've just moved flat actually, moved
All
out of the
right.
city. So yeah.
Where you living?
I'm just outside in Hearts and yeah, it's just a really nice, very calm, very quiet, very peaceful place. Just me and my daughter.
I mean,
So
as someone who's known you on and off for quite a long time, this
mm,
is the vibe that I'm getting is definitely one of quietness and contemplation.
mm.
Is this how you're all? Is this how you are all the time these days?
Nowadays, yeah, yeah. I'm 15 months sober. Um, so now very much so. Yeah, I'm really, really trying to just stay consistent and calm.
What led to you deciding to stop drinking? I didn't really know that you. I mean, I've never really drunk, so I've never said I was straight edge because I do like to drink, but I've never really drunk as a sort of social thing. And I didn't really know that you like to drink.
But I didn't really. I mean, I was straight as for 12 years, and then I started drinking, and then around like I don't know 2019, it all took a bit of a turn.
Right.
2020 is actually when it went a bit wrong. But that was, I mean, we lost
A lot of things
everything.
went
Yeah,
wrong in 2020. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I signed a lease for a business in March 2020. And 2 weeks later, we were closed. And then 2 weeks after that, we realized that we weren't going to be touring for a while.
Right.
And I think it just all imploded. But yeah, 3 years later, I found myself with just like a quite bad habit and quite bad just a lot of. I was in a really bad place. I was really lost. You know,
So what
very far from myself. So.
so what helped you out of that? I mean, it can't have just been not just drinking. There must have been something else.
Well, actually, it was mostly just that. It was I got into a recovery program called Smart, which I would highly recommend to anyone that needs some help. It's a little different from the 12-step programs, but it really helped me. And it's just it what it stands for is self-management and recovery training.
Right.
And you know, we had I didn't really have any training in recovery. I had plenty of training in drinking and taking drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So but yeah, that's why I don't know, like I had tried to get out of it a few times and it just didn't have the footing. And then that all led to like just a really bad moment in my life, which I'd rather not go into. But
Yeah. Of course.
off the back of that, those bad moments are moments for there are opportunities to get motivated on what you want out of life. And look, ultimately, James, what it stemmed from is I just didn't like myself. I really, really hated who I was. Um, I had no compassion, no kindness for myself, no element of self care in my life. I just didn't like who I was, and so I was ready to sort of, I was very far down that road. And then when you get sober, that's a radical act of love towards yourself. It really is, and that was just something I didn't know about. Didn't know what it was like to love myself. I know not from an ego perspective, been been there, but to actually care about myself and want a better life and want to do things differently. So yeah, I've just been busying myself with that really. Just,
I mean, I said to Jay, the PR, I said to Jay that we wouldn't talk about gallows, and
sure.
there's plenty of things to talk about that are,
Mm,
you know, now and in the future. But just because I was such a rabid fan of that band,
mm.
it sort of seems daft to sort of just pretend that, you know,
It's where we met.
yeah,
You
absolutely.
supported us
The,
relentlessly. Like no, I mean that, man. Like the
yeah,
words that you wrote about our time in that band and like the how you were critical, but analytically critical of what it was that we were trying to do. It was and it came from a place of like experience because you know music better than most better than most people I know. You know music well, through and through.
well,
So it was
you're saying some very kind things here.
No, I mean it, man. I mean it.
Um,
I've got a lot of time for you, James. Like it was,
oh,
and
thanks, mate.
I think you were one of several people who really helped shape what it was we were doing and how that was framed in the media in the very beginning. Not, and as you know, it's an incredible foothold to get. If you get that, and you've got a bit of motivation, you've got the grit to take it on. That's where you gain big momentum from, and
Well,
that's what
well,
happened to us.
well,
So
the reason I'm bringing it up, and I should say just to fire it back, I loads of time for you too, and I think the thing we should, if we weren't talking on a computer here, like we would maybe have a hug at this point. But the the reason why, I think, just to kind of knock it back at you, and sometimes when people say complimentary things to me about things I've written, the thing that I will always say, it was hard work, kind of having the views that I have about music and art and the working class and just the way that I see the world. It was hard work in like 2007, 2008, being at the NME when you felt like all of the music that surrounded the culture was so banal. So when a band like Gallows came along, it was like your band gave me something as well. Like it sort of kept me sane going into work every day, and felt like you were doing something important really with what you did. But the reason why I bring it up is because, and then let's talk about the music you're making now. But the reason why I bring it up is because you saying that you felt like you didn't love yourself.
mm,
Interestingly, that time in Gallows, for sort of all of the, and I say this affectionately because some of them are my friends, but for some of the sort of indie kind of Burks in the enemy office who were like, oh my God, he goes in the crowd and people people punch him and it's so violent and
mm,
over the top. And like, part of me is a bit like, well, have you ever seen a Cro-Mag show kind of thing?
yeah,
It's like that's hardcore. But I used to get a bit of a vibe watching you where I was like, is he almost purging himself here? Are
mm,
people is he almost like punishing himself here?
yeah,
And I wonder whether drinking or whatever else you did for a period of time was the same kind of punishment you were putting yourself through.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I look back on it now, that was a decade of self harm.
Yeah,
Truly, the difficulty was, it was celebrated. It's how I made my living. So
yeah.
I'd come off stage in pieces like really sometimes quite fucked up and pulled apart, and it'd be lauded. It's like, oh, a great show.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely when you take away sort of the creative control I had in tattooing and the connection that was there, and you take away the release from playing shows, um, and remove that connection, and you isolate someone for 3 years whose whole role is to express and to connect with people, and to provide a cathartic uh, environment for people to come and get out whatever they can't get out. Um, I went inwards in totally the wrong way, on a mission to just fucking destroy myself.
Do
It's
you know
hard to talk.
why? Do you know why you didn't like yourself? It's a weird one that when people. I mean, I've done loads of therapy, right? And
Mm,
I've had my own kind of mental illness problems. And when people say that they don't like themselves, I can't quite relate to that because like I've always had quite a balanced view of what my flaws are and what I think I'm kind of good at. But ultimately, when I've spent time, I was a bit of a loner, really. When I'm in my own head, it's not me that is kind of the problem. It's like the world. So I struggle to sort of know what that feels like. Like, what? Why do you think that you hated yourself?
Um, I've always had the fair amount of self-awareness. Um, I'm sensitive as fuck, so I take on a lot of things. I can't really regulate what comes into me well. Like, I could read 1,000 nice things about me, but I'll remember the name of the person that wrote the bad thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like, and it'll really take, like, there'll be a complete stranger, but it will just hit me to my very core. Obviously, like, drugs and drink are good at masking that for a while, and that was the problem. So I found a really effective coping mechanism for a little while. Unfortunately, I was late into life starting that, and had the means, and the motivation, and that leads you down one road, and that's to it eventually comes to a head, and then you have to decide what you want to do from there. And what I wanted to do at that point was understand why I didn't like myself. I wanted to understand, and so that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been in therapy for a long time. It didn't get effective until I stopped drinking.
Yeah, yeah,
It didn't get effective till I stopped taking drugs. Like that's just where it is now. And it's there's no judgment for anyone that's on that path. Like, that's your life. Like, go out and live however you want to live. But I've met a lot of people that are struggling with it, and I'm in a place to help them and provide like resources that help me. One that really got me was a hierarchy of values.
all right,
I
okay,
learned, we were in a
yeah.
meeting and someone told me to write down what was most important to me, and I wrote this long list. My band, my creative freedom, my daughter, my family, my ability to track, like all this fucking list of things. And they were like, why did you not put drugs on top? And I was just devastated, man. I was like, really, like, that stayed with me forever. And since then, it's just like I prioritize sobriety now in a way that I never have before. Like in the past when I was sober, I didn't really know why. I think I was sober out of fear,
Why would they think you would put drugs at the top though? I don't
because at the
understand.
time that was my main priority. That's the whole point with when you're an active addict, your main priority, you prioritize using over everything else.
Yeah.
When they recognize, when they say that to you from where you've been,
Oh, okay, I
I was
understand.
in a really good place to sort of take that in and say, yeah, fuck, past couple of years, that's what it's been.
How have you learned to I mean it's not even just the fact that like you are a person of note, as in you were a singer in a band. It's like,
Yeah.
we live in this era where everyone wants to psychoanalyze each other and everyone has the means to pass judgment. So I actually think that ability to know yourself and love yourself and sort of distinguish between whose opinion you want to value and whose opinion you don't is like critical to survival in many ways. How have you learned to do that?
Yes, I'm still learning.
Right.
It's what one thing I have to come back to is that there is just me. There is only me, And if
What
I
do you
if
mean?
I allow myself to be derailed
Okay.
by other people's thinking, the only person that actually suffers is me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm really trying but again, that takes um quite a lot of care for yourself, to want to be able to remove yourself from that and say that's just someone else's opinion. And I know this might sound really easy to a lot of people, but it just never has been to me. Never has been. I can't really explain why, but what I do know is I'm 39 years old and I feel it now. It's nice. I feel in a really good place.
Yeah. I
Really.
mean, I don't want to sound like Rod Stewart, but it is a case of, I mean, there's sometimes I think it's good to sound like Rod Stewart. What a voice! But it is that thing of like, I wish I knew, I wish I knew now when I was younger. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 43 now, and I, I wouldn't trade being 43 over being 23, other than the fact that my knees didn't hurt as much when I got up in the morning.
Yeah.
Um, I again, I'm going to sound like I'm psychoanalyzing you slightly, but I think the thing that I've always felt is a bit of a tragedy about you, Frank, is that when you came along, Gallows were so amazing because the songs were amazing and also the live experience was amazing. And there was some real poetry in those songs as well. And in a way, you also kind of predicted the the broken mess that is Britain today long
Mm.
before anyone else. So there's a lot there which is of value. But I also kind of used to look at you and go, I think this guy, it's almost like people were sort of trying to put you in a box in a way. Here's like this angry ginger kid. And like,
Mm.
what's been interesting, even with it when it was pure love, but certainly the Rattlesnakes, is that it's like there's an artistry to what you obviously want to do. The two songs I've heard from the new record are like really good
They haven't
songs.
sent you the record.
They haven't sent me the record now, but I have been, I have
James,
been, I have been.
we'll stay on after this. You said you, and I'll ping you the record.
Oh, well, thank you.
I think you'll really like it. It's yeah. Sorry, carry on. Cut you
But
off.
do you know what I mean though? It's that thing of like if someone's saying, "Oh, this is this guy that's full of rage and anger," but actually you want to like explore the other emotions of being a
Mm,
human, or you want to sing but you don't want to shout. It's a little bit like it's not just you. I find that with loads of artists. You know what I
mm.
mean? It's like people have decided what they are, and then it's I don't
Yeah, it's
know.
much harder to sort of shed your skin these days. No pun intended, but
Yeah,
um, once people feel like they have you figured out, they want you to stay there. They don't want you to deviate from what it is. And notice that in a lot of people that like because they link to you in a way where you're their identity. So if you're changing, who the fuck are they? Like they don't know themselves anymore because
yeah,
they,
yeah.
they they link to a record or to a sound or to a certain time. Um, it's frustrating for me. Like I tell you what, it's interesting to hear that you've only been sent two songs as well because I'm I'm getting that sort of feedback from the reviews and the questions that I'm getting in these interviews. And that's
Right.
really frustrating because when you hear the records, you'll hear how vast it is. And um, but what I'm witnessing being written down about it now that will come out before it's released and that will guide the early adopters' judgment is just it's clear that they haven't heard the whole thing,
Right.
and that's frustrating because it's a record of great scope and great introspection, and I think arguably it's my best work. I would say that, but this one took a lot out of me, like, and I was writing it at a time where I really was trying to know who I am, really trying to understand who I am, and I think that's what makes an amazing record is when people put themselves, artists specifically, put themselves into, um, swim just a bit out of their depth. I was barely like chin above water in this one, so it was good. I'll
So,
send it to you.
so was that sobriety? Was it sobriety that allowed you to do that?
No,
Was it?
it went sort of hand in hand. I was trying to do that desperately. A lot of this was written like throughout that chaos. It's a when I say a vast record, it's years old and as modern as yesterday in
Right.
places. You
Right.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's lyrics on there that were written before we wrote Sticky, the whole album.
Right. Okay.
But they've just found their place. And I think that this is something that Nick Cave writes about it a lot, where he just his lyrics eventually find a place. Bobby Gillespie told me about it. He used some lyrics on when he came and worked on Original Sin with us on the last record. And he told us that he'd written them for an album years ago, and they just never really found their place. And now he this was the right moment for them. And that it's like that with life. Like I write every day, and no matter what's going on in my life. So this record is made up of of all kinds of chaos and all kinds of hope, right? And what sobriety gave me was the means to do it, to get it, to organize it, and then to be present enough to feel it all. They say that in recovery, like the good thing about recovery is you get your feelings back, and the bad thing is you get your feelings back. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
for me, being amongst all of that and really living it. It's funny that you said like there's always been a bit of tragedy sort of surrounding me. Um, I've felt that weirdly.
Well,
Like
yeah.
I've carried that with me a lot of my life. I don't know what I feel like. Yeah, I don't want to. I don't know. It's like I always knew something bad was going to happen to me. And I feel like it really has now. Do you know what I mean? Like what I lived through was like quite a lot. So
I mean, what I will say, this is about you, not me. But I've just written a book that's about me and my OCD, but sort of my time as a music journalist, but with the backdrop of me having obsessive compulsive disorder and some of the problems that caused me. And there's a big passage in there about gallows, so keep your eyes out for that. And I think what I kind of learned from experiences is that I don't want to sort of sound too sort of life coach, but I think that if you accept that a life will be full of ups and downs, and if you live a life in an extreme way, like I think perhaps me and you have, then the highs will be very high and the lows will be very low. It isn't really about trying to like live a life without those highs and lows, but it is like how you bounce back. It is how you see opportunities in problems, really. And I certainly feel like some of the stuff that I've experienced in my life, I'm better for it. I think the problem is that it's just sort of recovering from the scarring of those experiences, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. If you think about it as peaks and troughs, you think about it as highs and lows. There's a median between that high. A lot of people's highs and lows are like this, and ours are like right to the top and right to the bottom. But there's still a median in the middle of that. There's a middle line that's like pretty comfortable. I've never ever lived on that line, not once. Like I lived the highs and I lived the lows, which was a phenomenally exciting life. Like I don't believe that I was always present enough to appreciate it. Like there were times in gallows where I've really felt uncomfortable and wasn't enjoying the situation that I was in and couldn't escape it. But I'm now showing up for myself in a way where I'm living much more consistently on that median, so the highs happen and the lows happen, but I don't go with them. I live in between them pretty steadily, and don't really allow myself to get knocked too far high or too far low. And it's really nice, man. Like it's balance ultimately is what it is, and that's really
I think
special.
when I was saying tragedy in a way is, it's like when I was listening to that song Brambles, which is a great song, and I think your vocal on that is, I mean, I just think you're a really good singer, and I am interested in a way. I think I've asked you this before, but I am interested in almost how it felt when you realized that you could sing, like
Mm.
properly sing. But I think the thing that really interests me about like that song, for example, on the two songs I've heard from the record, is that when I was watching the video and I was thinking, oh, it's kind of like a bit of a folk horror thing going on here. It's kind of a bit Wicker Man, but it's also like it's also quite funny. Like there's kind of a payoff to the video, and the song has kind of got this sort of creepy, kind of broody kind of vulnerability to it. And I think that's the thing, is that for such a long time it was like, I worked at the Media in an era where, there would be like cartoons of, rock stars or musicians or singers or whatever. And I'm not necessarily against that. I like a lot of that stuff, but it was like almost, here's like an encapsulation of what this person is. And it's like, I just think that's the real sadness. Is it's like, but you can substitute that from being like a kid from Watford, or in my case, a kid from South Yorkshire, from just a shithole pit village. It's like almost kind of, there's this narrative that's put upon you, and I just think that's so sad when, in your case, it's like you were obviously a very creative man.
Mm. Yeah, I'm from Hemel, by the way. But
Okay, I mean, I'm from the north, so isn't it all the same? I I
um,
I used to have a friend who lived in Tunbridge Wells when I did a fanzine, and I met a friend who lived in Tunbridge Wells, and I thought I was London for years because it just wasn't. It just was, down south, like. Um. So what?
yeah, it's interesting what you're saying about how people just they like I said they wanna find where you belong in their life, um, as much as you want to find out where you belong in yours, kind of.
Well, I think one of the genius things is when it's like when you realize that almost everything is about people's own selves.
Mm.
You know, so it's almost like criticism is so often projection of people's own insecurities. Like I find that bonkers. I find people endlessly fascinating, but also kind of endlessly disappointing because I just thought we were more complex than actually I think we are sometimes.
Yeah, pretty straightforward, really. Like all needs met. Cool. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, no, and that's one of the other things that has helped me through is just like understanding what projection is and just how it plays out in people. And yeah, it's been helpful.
How is it? You know, you were saying about that thing about hating yourself. How what was it like? You know, because again with Gallows, it's like you could have really kind of gone nowhere after that, right?
Yeah,
Because it was a band that was a bit of a phenomenon, but it also kind of ended a bit ugly. But
yeah,
then you kind of went off and did something else, and then you know it could have you could have just been the guy from Gallows who just kind of disappeared into nothing. But the fact that you know the Rattlesnakes are like a draw, like you know you can play big venues.
yeah.
That's a real achievement. And did that not put some love for yourself in you?
It did, but well, it does, but it's ego. Do you know what I mean? It's a success trap.
Right. Okay.
If you don't actually care about yourself, like if your entire validation is based on how well your band's doing. And when your band isn't doing well, which inevitably in the realm of music will have some good moments and some bad moments, you know, tickets will fly out and then there'll be slower years where they don't. Like that's gonna come back and affect you profoundly. You know, it's gonna have a big impact. Um I've always considered myself an artist more than a musician.
Okay.
Always, whether it's because of writing or because of drawing. But it definitely did help, and it made me once I eventually started getting into the musical aspect of it. You know, there's some songs on the new record that have got like where I wrote the keys, you know, for them,
Right.
or like you know, so made bolder steps towards a musical contribution to the song, which that gave me. That's like a little flower of like self-worth blossoming where you're like, oh, I'm not actually that I belong here. That's one of the ways to really combat imposter syndrome. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like I'm not just in Gallows, you know, people call me the voice. I didn't even see me as that. I saw me as the fury. Like I was the aggression, I was the violence, I was the drama,
Right.
you know. In pure love, I was trying to be the voice, but that is not what people wanted from me at that point. So they were just confused. Some people really got it and really latched on, and in itself, that band was amazing. It gave me that was fucking hard work. I was trying to sell yourself with that art from
Yeah.
where we came
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
was brave.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. It was a total. It was total. It wasn't what people were expecting.
it wasn't what people wanted either, and that's the hard bit is that when people recognize, oh, this guy isn't actually going to give us what we want. That's when you're like, well, what am I putting out? Will they actually like it? I can't care about that. I need to just make what I make. And that's with this. This is our fifth Rattlesnakes record, but we're still talking about Gallows. Do you know what I mean? And that's not to like deviate from this. I think you and I probably had to have this chat at some point anyway in a bigger way.
Yeah.
And that is also to say that, and this is going to get me in a load of trouble probably, but I reckon if I went back to Gallows now, it I would be the best. It would be the best version of that band that's ever existed. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Because for me now, not only can I sing, but I understand who the fuck I am, and I'm healthy. I'm like I care about myself. Like I'm not interested with the trappings of rock and roll. Like I've lived it all. Do you know what I mean? I've done it. Like Rattlesnakes far exceeded what we could achieve as Gallows. Really, you know, we sold out Alexandria Palace as Rattlesnakes,
Yeah.
which for
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
is
Totally.
fucking mad. Like
Yeah.
that's you know so.
I should say by the way that whatever other podcasts that you do or magazines on the campaign for the new record, I think if people start talking about Gallows, you should say to them, "Shut up." I just think I'm allowed a pass, basically. But no, because I think that you know the thing with Gallows for me is it's always going to be about you know a year of my life where I was really unhappy unless I was watching you trying to kill yourself in the old blue last. You know what I mean? It was like it was about, almost like you say, a kind of a marker of my life. And like the Rattlesnakes are a band that I've seen and I really enjoy, and I look at you on stage and go, I'm really proud of that guy, that he's made something else of real value. But it's that thing that you always drag back to it, because it is, as I was saying before, it's always about yourself, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's always like, here's this thing
Ultimately,
that
yeah.
mattered to me, you know?
Mm. But it's nice to sit here and just even be able to talk about it. It's like it's
I mean,
not.
you can tell me to fuck off when I ask you this, but have they ever asked you to go back?
Yeah, countless times. Yeah, yeah,
Because
all the time.
there must be some money in it.
Probably. I mean, it got really close at one point, but Rattlesnakes was just born, like it was moving as well. It had momentum,
Yeah,
and what happens is though that we've never just got in a room, all of us, and sat down and just hashed it out. Like really sat down face to face and said like, get it out now. Do you know what I mean? And then
yeah,
what happens is like people, the conversations are business until they're not. And then as soon as that goes out the window, I don't really have time to get into that sort of stuff. But then you hear stuff on the grapevine that someone said, or someone's mentioned this, or this is the reason why you didn't do it. And there's a lot banded around about why I didn't do it. The reason is that I didn't want to jeopardize what I had with Rattlesnakes at the time. Like I
yeah,
love this band, you know,
yeah,
it's my project. I owe a lot to Dean for like helping pull me out. And it's got scope, you know, we literally go in the studio and make whatever the fuck we want to make, or whatever we need to process, we go and make it. But you know, it's one of them things. It's a never say never thing. I've been asked many times, but it would need to. We'd first things first. We'd have to sit down. There's a lot to be said. I imagine, you know.
I mean, listen, it's a bit kind of behind the curtain for people who listen to this podcast, but you know, most people that I, you know, sort of know that are in that band and what the other things that they're doing with their lives, they're doing all right, you know. So it's like, it's not just you. It's like, in a way, I feel like it sort of doesn't need to happen yet.
Well,
But
you know, the complicated bit is they're kind of still a band.
yeah,
You know, there's a version of Gallows that still exists that could play shows. You know, everyone in there is busy. Everyone,
I thought Wade had moved on, you see. So
yeah. I mean, I don't know. I sort of stay out of it. I mean, Wade's busy though. Like you know, with Alexis and everything. Like he seems like
yeah,
busy non-stop sort of
yeah,
thing. And I've got no bad blood for any of them. Like I love them all like brothers, but I don't get on with my own brothers all the time. so
yeah,
that's the sort of example of how those things work. But what we did do is we changed each other's lives, and there's and I really believe for the better, and um, you have to respect that, you know. But
yeah,
maybe in
totally.
the past I wasn't in a place to, you know. I've said my fair share of bad shit about them lads, like, and you know, hindsight is a wonderful thing.
I have to say, I probably wouldn't have said this at the time, but I did think that you wearing a Pure Love shirt at your last appearance with them was A, baller, but also B, maybe unwise.
Yeah, yeah. But the thing is, I didn't. Yeah, at that point though, we were so far removed from each other.
Yeah,
There wasn't. It didn't feel like there was much respect anywhere, and
yeah,
it was really difficult. Ian. It's really complicated situation. Because ultimately it was a business that still made money, and um, everybody wanted their part of it. It was complicated. Yeah, like I said, hindsight, it's a wonderful thing. Do you know what I mean? I certainly am not that antagonistic anymore.
what's but yeah, be a little bit antagonistic though. The world
Yeah, there's a
needs,
time and a place for it. Do you know,
yeah,
this is what I mean. It's like I went out wearing that with the mindset that that was what I was setting. I was putting that was my flag in the sand. You know, like this is what I'm doing next.
yeah,
And I also was trying to lead a bit with love. You know, like I'd led with hatred for a long time. I mean, that we can sit and talk about that for fucking hours. Like the world is full of it at the minute. This is like easily the most divided, fucking like savage world to be a part of at the minute. Like it's there's genocide on the telly constantly. There's genocide hidden. There's racism. There's homophobia. There's misogyny. It's fucking everywhere. It's like
Well, this is it's kind of been quite weird to me, really, that this has been I always felt as a journalist that I wanted to go. I was just interested in people, right? I was just interested in, and quite often the people who are the most interesting are the people who are quote unquote problematic, because they're the people who, it's like if someone says someone's a dickhead, I want to know why people think they're a dickhead, because I don't think that people are just dickheads. Like, I think they are shades of all colors, right? And I've
yeah,
always wanted to know what's kind of going on with difficult and problematic people. And for me, it was like when the world became so much about here's a good person, here's a bad person. Like, I had a real problem with that, and I found that really difficult because I was like, I want to associate with whoever I want to associate with, regardless of what their politics are. I mean, I never would have thought when I was at sort of my lowest ebb with my OCD, like the first person that showed me the most kindness was someone who was a brazen Tory, and they're not my politics in the slightest.
sure.
And it was mind blowing to me because I thought I was really more of a humanist than a sort of a political person, and yet I've judged this person based on where they put a tick in a box. And actually, that person, I might not even be here if it wasn't for that person. And it just taught me a lot about people, the nuance of people. And I don't really understand why that's so hard, really, because for other people to adopt, because I feel like if we could start looking at our commonalities rather than these binary factors that segregate us or push us apart or make us go after each other's strokes, then I just think we'd be in such a better place. And obviously, social media is part of it, and obviously the internet and all that stuff. But it really worries me because it's like obviously this year you've got like a general election, you've got a US election. Trump's probably going to get in, blah blah blah. It's going to be all sorts of noise and hatred and anger. But for me, it's like it's more than just who we're voting for. It's something's gone wrong with us. Like
Mm.
there's something wrong with humanity, and I can only think that empathy and love is the way that you fix it, but
Well,
I don't
it's
really
it's
know how you do
community
that.
that's missing.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like having a community spirit for your fellow man. Like that's just gone. It's devoid. It's now we're like, and I think everybody hates capitalism, but they don't. But then they argue about like they only really argue about how it's not working for them. They
yeah,
don't they
yeah,
don't look
yeah.
at it like the big societal problem that it is. That ultimately all of this runs back to that, to money and control, and that's what we've got with everyone's an influencer. Doesn't matter what you're doing, you're live streaming your life, which is making us actually it's the illusion of connection. We think we're connected, but it's all linked to capitalism and commercialism, and we're more isolated than ever. Where is the actual community? Like, what are we watching any of these people do that's for the betterment of others if they're not filming it, you know?
Yeah, I sometimes, again, it's sort of something I've learned over the years is that I'm quite suspicious of people who sort of project their values in a way. I
Mm.
sort of feel like the people who are really worth following are sometimes the quieter ones, that don't feel like they need the sort of. Anyway, we're going well into the
We
weeds here.
went deep, didn't we? Fucking hell.
Well, this is what I do on the podcast. I get deep. Listen, we should probably wrap up because I said I'd keep it about this rover.
I think we probably need to do another one about the album.
I
Um,
am. I think that's a brilliant idea.
I
How
tell you what, I'll
about
send it to you after this, and then if you've got time, we'll do another one about the record because we needed a catch up anyway.
so the record is it 26?
Yeah,
Good
26th of Jan.
skills, James. So, um, yeah. Okay. What we'll do is I'm going to press end record,
Cool.
and then I'll send you my email address, which I think you might have, but I'll send you anyway.
Yeah,
And then if you send me the record, and then we'll reconvene before the record's out and do part two.
would love that.
What a plan. All right, dude. See ya.